There are places on this earth where the silence is so ancient it becomes a kind of presence, a weight pressing down on the living. In the far north of Finland, beneath the shadow of retreating ice, the land whispers of a mystery that has no name and no clear shape. Imagine a civilization that rose not after the last ice age, but in the unimaginable warmth and deep time before the glaciers advanced. Mainstream history has long taught us that complex human societies are a recent bloom, barely 12,000 years old. Yet scattered across the globe, anomalous structures are forcing a painful, thrilling question. What if we are not the first? We are going to a place where the ice sheet was over 2 kilometers thick, a slow-moving crystal sea that scraped the planet down to its naked bone. Any temple, any monument, any whisper of a pre-glacial people would have been ground into dust and scattered across the seabed. And yet, the idea persists, refusing to die in the quiet minds of those who read the stones differently. This is the enigma of the Ice Age temples of Finland, a ghost story told by the bedrock itself. You might think that total destruction means total erasure, that the ice left no room for argument. But the absence of evidence is not, and has never been, the evidence of absence, and the earth is a reluctant confessor. In the pine-scented darkness of a Finnish autumn, when the pale sun barely hauls itself above the horizon, the landscape feels like a lost memory. Smooth, polished outcrops of granite, scraped by ancient glaciers, lie half-buried in moss like the remains of sleeping giants. It was in the 19th century that geologists first began to understand the brutal sculpting power of continental ice. They read the scratches on the rocks, the erratic boulders carried for hundreds of kilometers, and declared the land a clean slate. But even as that scientific consensus hardened, strange little anomalies began to surface, troubling the tidy narrative of a pre-human wilderness. Deep in a copper mine, beneath layers of untouched glacial drift, workers found what seemed to be the charred remains of an ancient hearth. The carbon dating told a story that should have been impossible. Organic material far older than the last glacial maximum. The find was challenged, of course, dismissed by many as contamination or a natural geological fire, and the debate was buried in academic journals. But the whisper of that impossible fire lit a slow, creeping contagion in the minds of a few dedicated researchers. If you stand on the ancient worn mountains of Finnish Lapland, you are standing on some of the oldest rocks on the continent, the stubborn roots of vanished peaks. These rocks are the deep basement of the world, and they hold secrets in their fractures, secrets older than the ice. Some geologists, looking at peculiar arrangements of stones in isolated valleys, have hesitated to call them entirely natural. They find alignments that seem to echo celestial cardinal points, positioned before the Earth's tilt shifted the sky, and they fall silent, unsure of what they are seeing. The imagination runs wild in such a landscape, conjuring visions of a lost northern culture, a Hyperborean myth made flesh. Ancient Greek historians wrote of a land far to the north where the sun shone at midnight, and a wise, gentle race built cyclopean temples to forgotten gods. For centuries, these were considered mere fables, the daydreams of a Mediterranean people longing for a perfect, unreachable land. But as we now know, the Greek myths often carried a kernel of deep cultural memory, garbled yet persistent, of real places and real contacts from a shattered past. Could the myth of Hyperborea be the last faint echo of a civilization that vanished under the ice tens of thousands of years before Plato's Athens? The geological record is a brutal logbook, and it shows us that the last great glaciation began its grinding march southward, approximately 115,000 years ago. For almost the entire span of human existence on this planet, the northern latitudes were locked in a prison of frozen water, impassable and utterly sterile. Any structure built before that relentless advance would have been pulverized and bulldozed into the North Atlantic by the sheer irresistible weight of the ice. This is the dead end that every serious archaeologist hits, the rational, logical, despairing truth. The destruction was absolute. And yet, pockets of the far north, certain coastal shelves now drowned by rising seas, might have escaped the worst of the glacial scouring. Beneath the icy waves of the Baltic Sea, sonar scans have revealed baffling formations, long ridges of stone that do not fit standard models of glacial deposition. Divers who have visited these Baltic anomalies speak of a profound and eerie stillness, a place where stone blocks seem deliberately fitted, though corroded by eons of salt and pressure. The temptation is to see what we want to see, to project the human need for pattern onto the random chaos of nature. Yet when we look at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a temple complex deliberately buried 12,000 years ago, we realize that monumental architecture is far older than we once dared to believe. If humanity was building soaring pillars and intricate animal reliefs in Anatolia before the invention of pottery, what might have been lost under the ice? Göbekli Tepe shattered the old narrative, proving that hunter-gatherers could organize hundreds of people to carve and raise 40-ton megaliths with astonishing skill. This brings us to the most chilling hypothesis that a sophisticated pre-glacial culture existed in the north, and its traces are not merely hidden, but atomized. Some researchers theorize that this lost northern civilization did not vanish, but migrated south as the ice advanced, seeding the myths and astronomical knowledge of later cultures. You can trace a ghostly highway of shared symbols, serpentine spirals, and abstract geometric patterns that appear in cave art across Europe, all pointing to a distant common origin. Where archaeology falters, local Finnish folklore begins to fill the silence with stories of the Jotuni, the ancient giants who shaped the land long before humans came. The old rune singers of Karelia chanted of a time when the earth was soft and the mountains walked, when the first fires were stolen from a dying star. Folklore is not history, but it can be a psychological map, a dreamscape painted by a people living in the shadow of inexplicable ruins they could not possibly have built. A darker hypothesis suggests that the ice did not kill this hypothetical northern civilization instantly. It consumed it over thousands of years, a slow, hopeless retreat. Generations would have been born and died in the shadow of the growing glacier, watching their temples swallowed by the irresistible, groaning wall of ice, a slow apocalypse. The psychological toll of such an event would be etched permanently into the human soul, a racial trauma of frost and silence that haunts our collective nightmares of the end of the world. This is why the search for these Finnish Ice Age temples is not just an archaeological treasure hunt. It is a journey into the deepest scar tissue of human memory. A lone geologist poring over satellite imagery in a dimly lit Helsinki office spends years tracing a peculiar circular depression in the bedrock, a phantom ring no one else can see. The obsession has stolen decades from men and women like him, the slow burn of a question that refuses to be extinguished by the cold water of academic skepticism. They are drawn to the silent forests not for glory, but to listen to the ground, to press their hands against the cold, polished rock and beg it to speak. You must understand that admitting the possibility of such a lost temple requires overturning the entire edifice of human prehistory as we currently accept it. It is a profoundly lonely intellectual position to stand at the edge of this frozen abyss and argue that we have fundamentally misunderstood our own story. The scientific method is a sword that cuts both ways. It demands proof, and the proof here has been systematically ground into dust, leaving only the phantom ache of its absence. Still, the soil whispers, if you know how to decode its chemical signature, the faintest traces of phosphorus and nitrogen that mark long-vanished human occupation. In certain deep protected cave systems near the Russian border, layers of sediment contain anomalous pollen from plants that should not have existed during the deep freeze. These are the botanical ghosts of a warmer world, a world where something or someone was cultivating or transporting specific flora in a frozen wasteland. Where mainstream science sees a coincidence of geological processes, a few rogue scholars see the faint blueprints of a ceremonial complex aligned to the solstices of a dead sky. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle until you stand at the edge of this silence, staring at the Baltic waters and feeling the abyss stare back. The ice was not a single static wall. It was a creature of breath and flow, advancing and retreating in smaller pulses, potentially exposing land for centuries at a time. During these brief interglacial windows, determined humans could have pushed northward along ice-free corridors, building on lands they knew would one day be destroyed. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, but as you look upon these worn granite hills, you realize time is the greatest eraser, not a revealer. Our entire civilization, all our skyscrapers and concrete monuments would be utterly invisible after 100,000 years of glacial ice reduced to a thin, anomalous layer of rust. This is the humbling, terrifying scale of the mystery, reminding us that we are a single, fragile chapter in a book whose earlier pages have been torn out and burned. A curious diver navigating the murky twilight of the Baltic descends toward one of those stone formations and experiences a sudden, overwhelming sense of not being alone. It is a purely irrational, primal response, the ancient part of the brain recognizing the deliberate imposition of order on stone, a place haunted by vanished intent. The human obsession with these ghosts takes its toll as expeditions vanish into the remote mires of the north, searching for the one cave that the ice miraculously spared. They are looking not for gold, but for a single, unambiguous stroke of a human chisel on a rock face that dates from before the glaciers, the holiest of grails. A respected professor, late in his career, risks his reputation on a paper arguing that a peculiar mound is the eroded stump of a stepped pyramid, and he is met with a wall of silence. The silence of the academic establishment can be far more chilling than the silence of the ice, a reminder that we punish those who question the deep time narrative. We forget that science is a series of funerals for comfortable certainties, and the death of the ice-swept wilderness model may be a slow, agonizing, and necessary one. To stand on the shores of Lake Inari during the deep polar night, under a sky that is a chaotic dance of green and violet light, is to feel the true scale of the unknown. The aurora borealis writhes above you like a sentient thing, and the frozen lake groans, a vast, mile-wide sound that is the voice of the earth, settling but never quite sleeping. In that moment, the rational mind breaks down, and the idea of a lost temple sleeping under the ice feels less like a hypothesis and more like a profound and undeniable memory. This is the sublime terror that drives the search, the knowledge that we are a species with amnesia, walking the polished floor of a museum whose exhibits have all been melted down. Our most advanced technology, our ground-penetrating radar and ice core analysis, can barely scratch the surface of what the glaciers have sealed away for an eternity. We are children pressing our ears to a locked door, catching the faint, muffled rhythm of a song we cannot fully hear and will likely never understand. The enduring enigma is not just about whether a temple existed, but about the utter fragility of memory and the ease with which the natural world can erase an entire civilization. We are left with the distant howling wind moving through empty pine forests, a lament for a history that can never be written, a name that can never be spoken. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to haunt us, to remind us of our smallness within the cosmic and geological drama. Or they may be the ultimate cosmic joke, the greatest truth of all, patiently waiting under the modern forest floor for a shift in the earth to reveal a single, undeniable megalith. We have mapped the surface of Mars with more fidelity than the hidden bedrock beneath the glacial drift of our own ancestral northern homelands. This is the great irony. We look to the stars for alien minds, while a silent alien past is embedded in the frozen ground beneath our very feet. The fog rolls in from the Arctic Ocean, thick and blinding, erasing the world in a damp gray oblivion. And you understand that this is what the ice did to the first chapter of our story. It created an oblivion, a white canvas upon which we can paint any truth we need to believe. But behind it, the rock holds its unbreakable, ancient silence. A rusted compass, an old map bathed in lantern light, footprints vanishing into fresh snow. These are the fragile tools we bring against the impregnable fortress of lost time. But the universe and this planet does not owe us a coherent history. It deals only in fragments, debris, and the slow, grinding silence of buried stone. You walk away from the shores of the Baltic, the strange stone formations now hidden by night and tide, and you carry the mystery, like a smooth, heavy stone in your pocket. You will never know for certain, and that is the true burden, the beautiful, terrible burden of being a temporary consciousness trapped in a body that craves permanent answers. The glaciers will return one day, as they always do, and they will finish the erasure, sweeping us away to join the impossible antediluvian temple builders in the ultimate silence. And in the end, the greatest temple of all is not a structure of stone, but the vast, echoing cathedral of our own unquenchable, beautiful, and doomed desire to know. Until that final freeze comes, we will listen in the darkness of the Finnish night for a whisper that is never quite audible, but never truly fades away.